excellent.
When was the last time that you avoided a tough conversation? And by tough conversation, I don't mean something that was overly dramatic or just some big blow up. I'm just talking about a conversation that you knew you needed to have and you didn't. Can you think about what the subject was about, what the topic of discussion was going to be? Was it a job performance issue or a boundary line that someone crossed, a relationship problem that you needed to talk about, or maybe a problem that you just hoped would fix itself? And if you're honest, ask yourself this question: why did I avoid it? Were you afraid of the conflict itself? Were you afraid of hurting someone's feelings? Were you worried that you just wouldn't be able to communicate the way you felt about the topic? Or maybe you just didn't even know how to start the conversation at all. See, many people think that tough conversations are avoided because people just don't care enough to have them. But most leaders, not all, I know, but I think most, they don't avoid the conversations because they don't care. I think it's the opposite. They avoid these conversations because they care a lot. They care about their relationship, they care about being liked, or they care about not saying the wrong thing. So they just convince themselves that the best thing that they can do is just wait. Wait for the right moment, or wait for the problem just to fix itself, or wait until at least it feels a little less awkward to have that conversation. But this is the problem. We know this. Hard conversations, they don't get easier with time. What started as a simple course correction eventually becomes character judgment. See, what could have been a 5-minute conversation now turns into months of frustration. And then by the time the conversation finally happens, it's not easy anymore. It's emotional, it's loaded with tension, and a whole lot of misunderstanding. And now, because it was avoided, everyone feels blindsided. But this is my goal for our conversation today. I want us to understand that hard conversations aren't a leadership failure, but avoiding them, it is. If you lead people, if you love people, if you parent people, or just work with people, hard conversations are just a part of life. Hard conversations don't mean you're doing something wrong. It's just that any kind of growth, it requires honesty. So today, I want to give you a simple framework that you can use, whether you're leading a team, having a conversation with a coworker, or with someone that you love. Because if you're going to have a hard conversation, just like the old saying goes, it's not what you say, but it's how you say it that matters. So today, we learn how to say it. Let's talk about how to have tough conversations. Welcome to the Mind Your Business podcast, the podcast for whatever business is on your mind. Let's get started.
Well, that's excellent.
Well, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Mind Your Business podcast. If this brings value to your life, you know what to do. Hit like so YouTube knows about it, subscribe so you can join the conversation, and share it with a friend so that they can join us. And of course, if you're listening from wherever you get your favorite podcast, leave a review. This helps me add as much value to as many people as possible. So before we discuss our framework for these hard conversations, we need to talk about the damage that happens when you avoid them, because some of you are already thinking, I'm not having that conversation no matter what you say. See, many people think they're keeping the peace, but they're actually just delaying the damage. See, when issues go unaddressed, they do not disappear. They just grow, meaning they get worse. These small frustrations that started off just insignificant, but they were there, well, they turn into resentment. And then confusion turns into assumptions. And then silence allows you to reframe your reality. So then you just start making up stories in your head about other people's intentions. And here's probably the most important but overlooked result. When you avoid a hard conversation with one person, it rarely affects just that one person. It affects the whole team. It affects the whole culture. It affects the whole family. See, other people see what's tolerated. They notice what goes unaddressed. And then over time, they just stop bringing their best because they don't believe that the standards matter anyway. So it doesn't matter what happens because no one's going to say anything about it. And then ultimately, like everything else, this is the fault of who? The leader. Because everything rises and falls on leadership. That's right. We get whatever it is that we tolerate. This is why hard conversations aren't optional for healthy leaders. You don't have them because you enjoy them. You have them because it has to be done. And that's why we're talking about this today. So now that we understand the cost of avoidance, let's talk about how to do it the right way. This is a simple framework that you can use anytime a tough conversation has to be had. I like simplicity, so we're going to use the acronym CARE. So let's get into it. The first one is C, and that stands for clarity. If you're going to have hard conversations, you need clarity. There are so many issues that could be resolved with that one word. So many issues could be removed from our line of sight. It could be removed from what we're hearing at work. It could be removed from our feelings, our emotions, and our experience if we just had clarity. I always say that unspoken expectations are always unmet expectations, meaning most people avoid saying what it is that they really mean. Think about how you communicate the hard things. We often soften the language. We speak in code with the tone of, well, we basically talk around the issue instead of talking about the issue. Maybe you've said stuff like, well, I just wanted to check in with you. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Or I don't know if this is a big deal, but, or maybe it's just me, but I've been seeing or I've been thinking. See, we think we're being kind, but clarity doesn't create a problem. Lack of clarity does. And this is the truth that you need to remember. Clarity is not cruelty. Clarity is kindness. So I want to give you just a few practical ways that you can be kind, but you can do it with clarity. So you can stop saying those muddy statements like we just said. And if you're going to do that, you need to start with your intent. The very first thing is just state your intent. Don't start the conversation with small talk and hope it magically just finds its way to the issue. Don't just say, well, I've noticed, or I just wanted to check in. Don't start that way. That just increases the anxiety. Just state the purpose up front. It can be as simple as just saying, hey, I want to talk about something important, or I want us to address something so that we can move forward. This immediately, right from the beginning, it tells the other person why you're there and what kind of conversation that you're about to have. It's clarity. I also think it's important to clarify the reason for the meeting before it even happens. State your intent when it's scheduled. See, that helps everyone be prepared. So I hate when a meeting happens and somebody says, hey, can I meet with you for 10 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour next Tuesday? And they don't offer any follow-up. I want to know, what are we meeting about next Tuesday so that I can be prepared for the meeting when we sit down and we have these conversations. You just give the clarity up front. And the second thing that you need to do is name the issue, not the person. So your goal here is not to attack the person. It's to address an action. See, there's a big difference between you're not committed and I've noticed deadlines have been missed over the last few weeks. See, one of those attacks the person and the other simply demands accountability. If you want clarity without defensiveness, talk about what happened, not who someone is. There's a big difference there. The third thing I would mention here with this is to be specific and not general. Vague feedback, that's confusing. And ultimately, it's useless. It makes no difference. It just makes the problem worse. So limit words like you always, or you never, or sometimes. See, these words just paint a broad picture. But specific moments, that's what brings clarity. So instead of saying this has been an issue for a while, say this has happened 3 times this month. Just be specific. It takes the guesswork out. And the fourth thing here is say everything. Say all of it. How often do we name the issue, but we never explain the reason that it matters? We focus so much on what was wrong that we never teach why that it matters so much. So when you're explaining your concerns, you should just say everything. Like, when this happens, here's what it affects. Or here's why this matters to the entire team. Or the reason we're having this conversation today, this couldn't be ignored because this is what's going to happen. See, people are far more receptive when they understand the why. So that is the C in care. So we know that we need clarity. Let's move on to the A, which is alignment. So clarity says, here's the issue. And alignment makes sure that everyone is talking about the same thing. This just makes sure that everybody's on the same page. I think alignment could be said, it is the proof of clarity. See, even if you think you've been clear, and maybe you have, but that still doesn't mean that the other person is in alignment. You think you're talking about performance, but they think you're questioning their effort. Maybe you think you're addressing a pattern, but they think you're reacting to just one bad day. See, alignment is about making sure the conversation doesn't turn into two people just talking over each other and around each other without making a connection. Here's an easy way that you could bring alignment. Since you'll start the hard conversation with clarity, it may sound like, here's what I've observed, or here's what I'm seeing consistently. Now ask them, does this match your understanding? Is this how you see the situation? And a question like that, it does two things. One, it invites correction if maybe you're missing something. And leaders, hey, we've got to be humble. Sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we didn't have all of the information that we needed. But secondly, it gives value to the other person in the process. You may learn that expectations were unclear. You may learn that resources were missing, or you may learn that something outside of work is impacting their performance. Alignment doesn't excuse the issue, but it does clarify it. And the goal here isn't to agree on every detail, but to at least agree on what needs to be addressed. Because once you're aligned on the problem, well, that's when you can move forward to a solution. And that leads us to the next step. The R in care is response. You need a response to what has just been discussed. See, once you're aligned on this issue, this is where you stop explaining and you start listening with the response. Alignment says, well, we see the same problem. And response says, now help me understand your perspective. I think this is the step that we probably rush the most, and it causes us to miss the important moment that we've been working toward. Think about it. We explain the issue, we justify our concerns, we bring a correction, and then we just move on. But we've missed out on the response. And this is a really important step because you don't fully understand a situation until you've heard the other side of it. So start the process by stating permission to share, and then ask a question like, can you help me understand what's been going on? What's your perspective on this? Is there something that I'm missing? And then you do what seems hard for a lot of leaders. You pause. Don't interrupt. Don't correct. Don't finish their sentence. Just listen. And I know it's hard to believe, but sometimes people genuinely don't realize that there's an issue. Sometimes expectations just weren't clear. Sometimes there were issues that you just didn't know existed. Now, I also realize that's not always the case. It's not always that innocent. There are people who just refuse to do what is right or what is required. But regardless, their response will reveal the facts. And here's something I've learned over time. Listening makes you a better leader. It just does. See, people don't shut down because they're corrected. They shut down because they don't feel heard. People are going to want to open up more when they know that you're willing to listen. So you become a person who is trusted. You become a person who cares. So when you're listening, when you take that time, make sure they know that their words matter. Give them the feedback when they talk. Just say, hey, I didn't realize that. Or I can see how that would be frustrating. Thank you for sharing that with me. And if you find that you were wrong, again, just admit it. Just own it. Just be humble. If something was unclear on your end, just say it. If expectations weren't communicated well, own it. See, this creates a bridge that you need, a bridge between the problem and a bridge between the solution. Because once someone feels heard, they're going to be far more willing to move forward. And if you're worried about it, acknowledgement is not agreement. It's respect. And everyone responds to respect. So don't let your worries about acknowledging their concern that it's going to be your agreement, that you are putting your approval on whatever it is they say. No, you're just respecting their voice, giving them an opportunity to speak up and to be heard. Now, for the last step, it's E, expectations. So now you have clarity, you're in alignment, and everyone has had a chance to respond. Now, in order to make progress, you have to set some expectations, because if you never set expectations, well, nothing actually changes. And sadly, these conversations often end with, well, let's just do better moving forward. Let's just put this behind us and let's move forward. After all the effort put into the conversation, it ends with the most important element that we started with, clarity. It ends without addressing clarity. Let's just move forward. There's no clear expectations there. And this is why setting clear expectations is important. Expectations turn the conversation into a commitment. It creates accountability. So you need to have expectations when you leave that conversation, like, well, the deadlines, they need to be met consistently. Communication, it needs to happen before there's an issue. This behavior, whatever it is you discussed, it can't continue, and if it does, this is the result. See, these are clearly defined expectations. And this just helps everyone to know where they are, where they're going, and how they're going to get there. Now, for those of you who are leading, let me add a few things here. If you're responsible for leading people, expectations are much easier to meet when there is support. So be sure to ask the question, what support do you need to meet this expectation? So basically what you're doing is you're giving them an opportunity to be empowered to do what it is you need them to do. So you can ask them, do you need extra training? Are there some resources that you're missing that if I provide, we can ensure that this happens? Do you know how to use all the resources, or that there are resources at your disposal? Or just a simple question that says, how can I help you? How can I better support you in your role? You're the leader. You're leading them. You should be encouraging them, educating them, empowering them. You are the leader. So trying to hold people accountable without doing this, it just sets them up for failure. And I hear a lot of leaders with a lot of excuses about why that's not your role. But a leader is there to lead. Now listen, expectations, you also need to include a timeline. You need to know if it's important that it gets on the schedule. Because if something is important to you, it's on your calendar, it's on your to-do list, you've got a deadline for it. So if it's important, you put it on the calendar. It gets a slot. So put it there. Just a simple, let's check back in 2 weeks. On this day, at this time, we're going to check in. Or we'll revisit this at the end of the month. See, anything like that, it's helpful. It helps make the expectation real. And then the last thing that I'll just mention here for you leaders is follow through. One conversation doesn't create the culture. Now, culture is important. You know, it's valuable. It's the foundation of our organization. And having that conversation, it's not going to correct it, but consistency does. So following up says, well, this actually mattered. They cared enough to stay engaged. This wasn't just a correction and then they abandoned me. Oh no, they said they would follow up at the end of the month and they did. And then at the decided time, if there's no progress, leaders, changes can be made. But when expectations are clear, when they're fair, and when they're followed up on, the changes become easier to make. So if they're not meeting their end of the bargain, if they're not following through, if they're not putting in their due diligence, it's a lot easier to make the hard decisions. So let's put all this together here. When a hard conversation shows up, you need to remember to care. Clarity, say the thing that needs to be said. Alignment, make sure you're solving the same problem. Response, listen before you decide. And then expectations, decide what happens next. Chances are there's a conversation that you've been putting off. And remember, hard conversations don't cause damage, silence does. So this is the challenge that I have for you. Who do you need to talk to? What do you need to say? And what would change if you had the courage to say it with care. So let me encourage you to care enough to have that hard conversation. Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Mind Your Business podcast. If you found this helpful, will you hit like so YouTube knows about it, subscribe so you can join the conversation, and share it with a friend so that they can join us on the next one. And if you're listening to wherever you get your favorite podcast, leave a review. Say the hard thing today so that growth can happen tomorrow. And until next time, go and mind your business.